Ugh, it's raining and cold and grey again. Ah! Hello everybody, how are you today? I'm getting a tad annoyed with this winter not turning into spring. We're not going to have the snow that was predicted, but what we are having are these chilly, grey, damp days every day, and it just it sort of creeps into your bones and into your soul, doesn't it? Ugh. Anyway, so I'm having yet another indoors day. Lots of sewing going on today, but I thought what I'd do as well, because it's not freezing cold, it's not cold by any means, but it's just that kind of, like I said, that sort of damp, chilly thing that sort of just invades you somehow. So I'm going to make myself a big pot of chilli today, because it's such a lovely, warming comfort food when the weather's... I'm looking out the window, the rain's starting again, you might hear it on the roof in a minute. So yeah, this is so easy to make, and it's incredibly satisfying to eat. Like I say, it's warming, it's comforting. I'll leave the pot on the stove for a couple of days and just keep dipping in. I'm going to make enough for 4 portions. If tomorrow I think, oh, I'm not going to get through it all, I'll whack it in the freezer, because actually it freezes perfectly well too. Yeah, so come on, let's get stuck in. I'll show you the ingredients. Just one thing to say, I'm going to grab from over here. Everything, apart from the spices and the soy I'm going to show you now, everything's from the garden, obviously, of course. Some of it frozen, some of it still fresh. But I'm also going to be using some TVP. That car alarm. It's just one of those days, rain, car alarms. Should we ignore it? Yeah, we'll ignore it, hopefully it'll go off. Yes, so this is TVP, textured vegetable protein. It's soya based, and hopefully you'll be able to see from this, it's dry. Now, I opt for this dried TVP over all the other products you can see on the market. I've been using this since I was a kid. Bless, my mum had to go miles to search for this when I announced I was going to be vegetarian back in the 70s, early 80s, I can't remember now, early 80s, when there was very, very little on the market as a meat substitute for veggies. And actually, for most of my cooking, you'll know that I don't generally use a meat substitute. I generally just make do with my plant-based meals. But when I do want to do something like a chili, sometimes if I'm doing a curry, that sort of thing, but I use the dry stuff over the wet stuff you can buy, because it is one of those things that's putting food miles onto my kind of lifetime of using petrochemicals, my carbon footprint, if you like. So the thing about the dry stuff is it's much more compact, it's much lighter in weight, so in terms of transport it is using considerably less fuel to transport it from here and there. Yes, I do think about that kind of stuff, and you know, maybe if we all thought a little bit more about it, we might start to make a difference. But the other thing, of course, is because it's dry, it can just store in a jar. You don't need, so like corn, I know a lot of people are using corn. I don't have anything against it per se, but a lot of it's for the freezer. So it has to be, when you think about it being transported, it has to be in frozen transportation, or the refrigerated version, refrigerated transportation, when it's in a warehouse, when it's in the shop, etc, etc. So if you can find some dry, brilliant. And the other thing about buying it dry, I can buy as much or as little as I want from my local health food shop. So I can buy 500 grams, a kilo, 3 kilos, whatever you like. So for this recipe, I'm going to use, it's about 100 grams dry, which equates to about 2 cups. But let me show you the ingredients. there's the soya mince, TVP, whatever you want to call it. So that was about 2 cups dry, about 100 grams, and about a cup or so of hot water, just to reconstitute it. When you're adding the hot water, you can also add a teaspoon of Marmite or Vegemite or one of those yeast extract type things, just to give you that umami taste. I've put a little bit of Marmite in with that. Then we've got the spices. I'm going to be using paprika, cumin, coriander, and of course chili, because it's a chili. Then the other ingredients, very simply, the equivalent of a can of tomatoes, a 400 gram can, I think it comes out at. This is a portion that came out of the freezer and I defrosted in the fridge overnight. Then we've got an onion. These are storing really well. I mean, if you think about it, where are we now? Very end of March. So they come out of the ground in end of July, August, I think. So August to September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So they came out of the ground 7 months ago and they're still going great guns. I'm going to use 4 cloves of garlic because I do love my garlic and I'm not expecting company in the next day or so. Yay! Then you want a pepper, 1 sweet pepper, either red, green, whatever colour you want, but these were the orange bell that I grew last year for the first time. I'm so happy. So I've just grabbed these out of the freezer. Now, normally when I start off with frying my onion and garlic, I do half oil, half water, so they get a steam / fry. But I'm actually going to pop these in first because they are going to, they're starting to melt because the kitchen's so warm. They are going to release a bit of water. So I will just do them in some oil to start with and then add the onion later. And then finally, of course, every chilli has to have beans. So normally you would use kidney beans in a chilli. I don't grow kidney beans. So these are some of my, it's about the equivalent again of a tin. This is some of my runner beans. Remember at the end of last year I was saying if you get absolutely sick to death of eating runner beans whole, or if they're getting a bit tough and stringy, do not despair and do not throw them in the compost. Pod them, get your beans out of the pods, freeze them, and then on a cold, miserable March day next year, hopefully it won't be quite so miserable and quite so dark and wet, hoik them out of the freezer and make a chilli with them. Yay! Now you may want to, so when I do the broad beans I usually give them a second skinning. Actually one of them's popped out of its skin there. Oh, I'm going to eat that one now. So I find with runner bean skins they're not as tough as broad beans and they're not as bitter. So I just leave them on because, you know, it's extra fibre, etc, etc. So what I did with these was took them out of the freezer, put them in the top of the steamer and steamed them for about 8 minutes because some of them are really, really quite big ones. Right, let's get this dish underway. Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be such a yummy, yummy thing to scoff all afternoon as I'm working in my grey dismal palace here. So I've just let the peppers sweat down a bit. I've got some random bits of the TVP in there, ignore those. Yes, so they sweated down a bit. All I did was a little tiny bit of oil in the bottom of the pan, really minimal, but that sort of juice that's come out of them and the water from the ice crystals, they've cooked in that, that's absolutely fine. And what's lovely is the smell coming off it. It just reminds me of late summer again. Oh, it's delish. And the irony of this dish today is literally a day or two ago I was pricking out the peppers for this year. So I hope this year's do half as well as last year's because I'm still loving last year's. And in another couple of days I will be planting my onions. So it's incredibly satisfying to be cooking at this time of year with food grown last year and to be starting that whole process again with so much hope, so much hope and optimism. So The peppers had about 5 minutes just to start their little, just to get defrosted and swept down a bit. That's the onions and garlic added. So now I'm just going to cover that again and give it, about 10 minutes really gently, just to start sweating down and going a little bit soft. Even now the smell is just scrummy. Garlic, onions, peppers, gently swept / frying, delicious. But now the exciting bit begins because the spices are going in. So I'm going to have a teaspoon of each spice. So I'm going to start with paprika. Then a teaspoon of cumin. Then a teaspoon of coriander. Oh gosh, the smell. And finally a teaspoon of chilli. Actually slightly less than a teaspoon, because I really love my spices, but really can't stand food that's so hot it makes my eyes water, or spices that are so hot, if you see what I mean. So just give those a little bit of a scrudge round. Oh, the smell is ridiculously good. How are all our inventors out there? Has anyone invented scratch and sniff YouTube yet? So a bit of a scrudge, and then we're just going to add the mince. And again, I'm just going to give that a bit of a whirl around. Oh, that handle's hot. Just to start to get it coated in the spices. And what I'll do now is I'm just going to leave it for literally sort of 2 or 3 minutes to let those spices start to go into the mince before I add the tomatoes. That's had its 3 or 4 minutes. I didn't time it exactly, but now time to get the tomatoes in. Like I said, this is about the equivalent of a tin of tomatoes, which is, I think it's about 400 grams, isn't it, in a tin. Again, I'm just going to give that a scrudge around. Now, lower the heat, and pop the lid back on and let it just stew in all its own gorgeous flavours, so everything really melts together for about sort of 20 to 30 minutes. If you think, just check on it every sort of 5-10 minutes or so. You might need to give it a stir. And if you think it's starting to look a bit dry, you can just top it up with some hot water from the kettle, or perhaps even a little bit of hot water with a teaspoon of Marmite added if you didn't add it earlier. But yeah, just keep an eye on it, and if it's looking a little bit dry, give it a top up, give it a stir every 5 minutes or so, and then we can start to think about adding the beans, and then we can start to think about eating it. Yum! Well, it's now had about 20 minutes, 20, clanking the lid. I have stirred it every 5 minutes or so, just to stop it catching. Oh, little tiny catch there. Actually, using these cast iron pans tends to stop that. Now for the beans. Like I say, normally you would do it with kidney beans. I don't grow them, haven't grown them, but you want about a tin of them. But instead I'm using my lovely runner beans. I mean, who cares what kind of beans it is? It's just having these gorgeous beans, and I've probably done more than about a tin's worth there. I love them. This is, never mind all the good stuff. I was going to say this is packed full of protein and fibre and all that wonderful stuff, but actually the main thing is it's super duper yummy. So now they've had a bit of a stir, I'm going to pop the lid back on and leave it again for 5 minutes, but this is the last time I'm leaving it, because then I'm going to get stuck in. Oh, best bit. Time to feed my face. That's just, the beans just had 5 minutes in there. Really, it's just to kind of warm them through and let them take up some of the flavour. Oh, I meant to turn the heat off. Normally, like I was just saying about the cast iron pans not catching too much, I also normally turn the heat off about 3 or 4 minutes before I want to finish, just because they retain the heat so well. Oops, never mind. Right, now, normally I would serve this with rice and then something like, for example, the sprouting kale tops, which are all sprouting like mad at the moment. However, I'm starving. This is only lunch, so it only needs to be a small meal, and I just want to get stuck in. So, yum, 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 yum. Imagine that, a load of, on a pile of rice, a load of green sprouts on the top, or if you were being really naughty, you could even maybe have some, there you are, cheese on the top, a little grating of cheese. I haven't got any cheese at the moment, kind of cutting down on it, but it doesn't matter because, like I say, I'm so starving I want to get stuck in. Excuse me. Oh, it's going to be super hot. Oh, even the bowl's hot. That is instant comfort. All the lovely warmth of the spices come through without being too sort of like too hot. Oh, I mean, excuse me. Oh. I'm in too much of a hurry to eat. Oh, it's so good. Honestly, that's so simple. You know, you could probably, most of you right now, make that straight out of your store cupboards and your freezers. You may have to buy some TVP or some mince, but you know, onions, garlic, beans, peppers, all of those things, tomatoes, all of those things, hopefully you either have in your cupboards or in your freezer or hanging in your shed. Excuse me, another mouthful. I love the beans in it as well because they give it a little bit of a bite. Dead easy. Takes a little bit of time, I'd say, from start to finish. What's the time now? Probably from the very, very first chop of a vegetable to serving up, it's probably about 45 minutes. The nice thing about this is you can leave it on the back of the stove. You can make it in the day, leave it on the back of the stove for that evening supper, and the flavours intensify. Right, I'm going to have to go and eat this because it's so scrumdiddly and I am Hank Marvin. So for now I'll say cheerio. Whatever you're getting up to keep yourselves occupied whilst it's raining still, or I know some of you have still got snow, for goodness sakes. Whatever it is you're doing, maybe make some time to get into the kitchen and have a look at what you've got left from last year's crops, whether it's stored dry or in the freezer or you've bottled things. Get some stuff out, chuck it together and have a go at inventing something yummy for you and your family to scoff, or if you're like me, just scoff it all on your own. So yes, I really am going to say cheerio. I'll see you all again really soon, I hope. Back in the garden, please. But until then, take care everyone. I'm going to eat.